Hi guys, it's Dave the Red Pill Coach. And when last we left one another, I was talking about the fact that MRP is particularly good at turning a terrible marriage into a decent and good, tolerable marriage. Good marriage into a great marriage. And I'm going to be talking about that on these podcasts. So let's get right back into it for part 2. Of turning a good marriage into a great marriage and identifying the parts that make a bad marriage, along with our knowledge of female behavior, female motivation, and the red pill, essentially the red pill. So by combining those two, along with my PhD in human social behavior and my book and a few other sources, I have created a program that works for you and that can restore your marriage and then turn it into something great. I've done it myself, and I can help you do it. I'm not saying I can do it for you. Only you can do it, because guess what, guys? The answer is within you, not me. But what I can do is help you elucidate the issues. I can identify the problems, and I can point you in the right direction. I can give you assignments. I can give you insight. And that's what we do as coaches. So contact me through my website at www.coachingformen.com. Think Fantastic Four, because that's the number 4. Coachingformen.com. Give me a call, shoot me an email, or send me an instant message through the website, or contact me through Reddit. All work just fine, and we'll set up a time when we can talk and when we can decide whether or not we're a good fit. I offer a 30 to 60 minute free consultation in order to determine that, if we're a good fit. I primarily work with men, and when I do work with couples, I work with them separately at first and then bring them together in later sessions. I believe that's the best way to proceed. Marriage counselors typically meet with the couple together, and then when they're about ready to get divorced after they destroyed the couple's marriage, they then separate them and tell them to get separate therapists. Well, I think that's the wrong direction. I think we should start out, if the couple are separate, we'll start out separate and we'll bring them together. And that seems to work much better and has much better results than traditional marriage counseling. I am unashamedly pro-male. I am not anti-female. I love women. I love the way they taste. I love the way they smell. I love the way they feel. I love the lilting sound of their voices. But I'm very realistic about women. Why? Because I am the Red Pill Coach. I have Red Pill knowledge, and I know about the motivations and the secret desires of women. Just between you and me, guys, it ain't pretty. But we can work through it, and we can see the good, we can find the happiness, and we can uncover the joy for you and the strategy forward. As a Red Pill Coach, I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you what I think. You are free to tell me you're full of crap, Dave. That's great. At least I've got you engaged in thinking. Even if you think I'm full of crap, that's fine. My goal is to get you thinking, to get you moving forward in the right direction. And we have a number of tactics that we employ to accomplish that. Now, how does coaching compare to therapy? Well, in therapy, they typically use a similar technique of listening for changes in energy. In other words, you've all seen the Freudian couch, where they lay on the couch and the therapist is facing away from them taking notes. Well, that therapist is listening for changes in energy. And specifically, he is looking the pains, the wrongs of the past. And the idea is to rip those scabs off and keep ripping it off until the skin scars over and you don't feel it anymore. Okay, that's not what coaches do. We don't hunt down the wrongs and the hurts of the past. We hunt down what is actionable, what is reasonable, and what you can do in the future. So that's kind of the difference between coaching and therapy. And I think it's a huge difference in technique and in results. So I've only got a few minutes left after my advertisement. I promise all of these videos will not be advertisements. I will talk about substantive issues primarily, and I will begin right now with talking about the number one issue that I see when I talk to men, and that is something uncovered by Gottman. It is the issue of flooding. Flooding. What is flooding? Well, if you understand evolutionary history, or even if you believe that God created everything 6,000 years ago, oh, that's fine, because men and women were evolved or created to have a fight or flight reflex. That fight or flight reflex is when the sympathetic nervous system, there's actually three nervous systems in the body. There's two parts of the central nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and there's a part of the gut called the enteric nervous system we don't have to worry about. But the part of the central nervous system called the sympathetic system, it activates in times of extreme stress. It was created or evolved to do one thing, to immediately bring your body in sympathy with this environment. In other words, you're walking through the jungle and there's a tiger standing right there. What happens? Well, you stop cold, you freeze like a deer in the headlights, you start to sweat, you start to shake, your heart shoots up to 160, your blood pressure shoots up to 180 over 250. Lots of things happen. Your body is saying, get ready, you need to fight for your life, or you need to run like hell for your life. So what does this have to do with marriage? As it turns out, it has everything to do with marriage. Because the number one problem that couples have, and that men have in particular, is that they get flooded when they're talking to their wife, when they're just talking and having a conversation. And Gottman discovered this. He reached a blocking point during his research. He couldn't figure out what was going on. Couples appeared to be getting along fine, and then they get divorced shortly after, and there was no explanation for it. And that continued on for several years until Gottman figured out that, gee, maybe I need to look at the physiology involved. And he attached biophysical sensors to the people. And you know what he discovered? The people who were going to get divorced in a couple of years' time, they didn't show any outward signs of flooding. But when you attach the biophysical monitors to them, they all showed, all the couples who were going to get divorced later, showed an increase in heart rate to 160, an increase in blood pressure to 180 over 250 sometimes, increase in sweating, trembling, shaking. Where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, you think your wife is a deadly tiger. That's right. Your body is reacting as if you are in a life or death struggle. So your first task, gentlemen, is to gain control over your flooding. Actually, the first task is to identify it. I suggest with all my clients that you spend at least a week taking the time to identify and learn to recognize the signs when your wife's screeching voice is making you flood. Then, once you have the ability to reliably identify your flooding, you can then work on controlling your autonomic responses using a variety of techniques from meditation, and I also highly encourage you to read the Enchidron by Epictetus and the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, in other words, the Stoics, because they will greatly help you with your flooding. Now, Married Red Pill does discuss this issue, and they break it down into DNGAF, do not give a fuck. And that works. That's what we're talking about. Stop caring so much about what your wife says and start observing your behavior, and later on, we'll be in a position to observe her behavior. Because once you learn to control your autonomic responses, Gottman calls that soothing, once you learn to soothe yourself, you can then Teach that skill to your wife. And that's the direction this is headed. You are the man, you are the leader of the home, and you, if you want your marriage to succeed, you have to be the one to lead your wife to a better place. That's what I do as a coach. That's what we do on Married Red Pill. And that's what you can do as well. Now, how does all this tie into Red Pill? Well, it ties in pretty closely. Because Heartiste at the Chateau teaches us that when you have control over yourself, you will have control over her. So the first task, gentlemen, is to begin identifying your flooding, and then we will work on ways to control it, and next week we'll work on ways to identify soothing attempts by your wife and how you can offer soothing attempts to your wife and thereby decrease the flooding, increase your self-control, and yes, increase your control over her. So I look forward to these podcasts. I will be back next week with another one. Give me your comments below. If you want me to return to the professor's format, where you don't have to look at my ugly mug, that's fine too. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But it'd actually be easier. I had to set up a whole studio here, and it was a little bit of a pain. It would be a lot easier just to drop some slides in there and do an audio, if that's what you want me to do. Give me some ideas for future topics, and let me know what your concerns are. Let me know what your pleasure is. And I hope that this podcast series will be educational and helpful to you and your marriage. Thank you very much.
I can't do this all on my own. No, I know I'm no Superman. I'm no Superman.